Okay.
Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Michael Fromm, and I'm board chair of JCPA, the network hub of 125 Jewish community relations councils and 17 national organizations. We're committed to bringing you stimulating discussions on important issues, all while you're stuck at home. Today's webinar is our fifth in a series on Jewish values during a pandemic. Please stay tuned for other educational JCPA webinars in the very near future. I would also ask our viewers to consider that these are difficult times for nonprofits like JCPA, and we urge you to financially support JCPA and other organizations you care about so that they can continue to function effectively. These are indeed challenging times. When the ground shifts under your feet, we're forced to chart a new path forward. We turn to trusted and proven voices who help us make sense of the world. These voices remind us of what we know and what we've been through and help us apply that knowledge to the changing circumstances. They make us more resilient. Natan Sharansky is one such voice. Mr. Sharansky is the most renowned former Soviet refusenik, an Israeli politician, author, and human rights activist. Most recently, he became the 2020 Israel Genesis Prize Laureate. Early on, Mr. Sharansky became associated with the human rights movement when he became an English interpreter for Andrei Sakharov. In 1973, he applied for an exit visa to Israel, but was refused on security grounds. Following this denial, he became more overtly involved with the refusenik movement and became an activist for Soviet Jews. In 1978, Mr. Sharansky was convicted of treason and spying on behalf of the United States and was sentenced to 13 years imprisonment in a Siberian forced labor camp. In 1986, he was released by President Gorbachev after intense political pressure from Ronald Reagan and the United States, and was finally able to emigrate to Israel. Once in Israel, he founded a political party, served as a Knesset member and deputy prime minister in various governments until 2006. In June 2009, Mr. Sharansky was elected chairman of the Jewish Agency for Israel and remains an important strategic advisor to world leaders. Natan, thank you so much for being with us today. And now I'll turn the program over to JCPA CEO, David Bernstein.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Natan, for being with us. It's quite an honor to have you here. And we know that viewers from around the country are really going to appreciate your perspective and your vantage point right now. You're in Israel. What's it like in Israel right now?
First, in Israel, it's always good to be. And but of course, today it's very quiet. The streets are empty. And we talk to our grandchildren through Zoom. That's quite a unfortunate experience. The only thing that I'm telling to Vital, only think if it were 10 years ago, we didn't have Zoom. So it's easier now. But in general, I have to say, I think there is, first of all, kind of sigh of relief because there is hope that finally we'll have a unity government. And also, though, of course, everybody is very concerned for every life, for every ill, for every unfortunately passing away. But still, when we compare with everything that's happening in the world, we have a feeling that our government and our leaders know what to do, and we were among the first to respond, and hopefully we start seeing the light in the end of the tunnel.
Great. So what do you think is unique about Israeli society and how it responds or is likely to respond to a pandemic?
Well, first of all, Israeli society is one family. I know that everybody Jews feel that they are part of the Jewish family. And it's a very empowering feeling. But in Israel, it's especially strong. So it's second, it's society which is used to emergency situation and which is disciplined in this way. We know that everybody has role, everybody is a soldier. And this feeling of solidarity and discipline is something very typical for Israeli society at this moment. And also when first it was prohibited to have crowds. The synagogues a week ago were closed. And then there were many minyanim in the streets, and it also was prohibited. So now you can see how on the balconies, people are standing on the balconies, and when they count, there are 10 people who see one another on the balcony. They have a minyan and they pray. So it's very unique pictures, typical for our.
No mafitza.
Yeah, well, that's all the kids. Maybe today it could be easier for me to negotiate the deal about the kotel, but who knows? We'll try again.
We'll try again. Someday people will be able to go to the kotel again. So obviously you spent time as a refusnik, you spent time in jail, you spent time in solitary confinement. That has molded your view of this in some way. Tell us what your experience in the Soviet Union taught you and has helped you adapt to the challenge today.
It's a funny thing. One would think that what my experience in the punishing cell, and punishing cell is a small, cold, dark hole with 3 pieces of bread and 3 cups of water a day, what it can have in common with people sitting today in all the luxury, connected through internet all the world, talking. But when I gave my advices, I put them on the internet, I think it reached by far more people in the world than all my books and all my articles together. So now I think there's no use in writing books. I should simply make clips on internet, that's all.
Right.
But it also showed that there is something to share, and I can tell you. First of all, yes, I did spend from 9 years, at least 4.5 years, I was in solitary confinement, and 405 days I was in punishing cell, which I just now said what it is. And there it is very important that to remind yourself every day why you're here. You're restricted, you cannot have your own plans, somebody is keeping you in these conditions. You have to remind yourself why you chose to be in these conditions. That there is unique struggle of the Jews of all the world against this empire, and you as a soldier in the struggle has a role, has a function, and that gives you a lot of strength. And so I say to people who are today complaining or being isolated, we have this invisible enemy, and if each of us will not play its role, we can lose. So it depends also on you. Second thing, I recommend people not to make plans or not to be dependent on the things which don't depend on you. You don't know when it will be finished. Don't make a plan that in a month from now you'll go on vacations, and then you'll be very upset and you'll be disappointed. I knew that it doesn't depend on me when I'll be released and if I'll be released at all. So I decided I don't think about it, but it does depend on me whether I'll be a free person in prison. And so every day I'm testing it, that I am a free person in prison. So make your plans which do depend on you. You want to learn new language, and you decide in a month I will learn French or whatever. And make a very challenging timetable for you, of reading book, of studying something, or learning Rambam, whatever you want. But make the plans which the achievement, put the aims the achievement of which depends on you. And then you really are the host of your life. In addition to this, don't forget about sense of humor. That's the best thing, to put everything in the right proportions. Thanks to internet, you have jokes every minute in English, in Russian, and Hebrew. A lot of jokes about our situation. Laugh on yourself and on our situation. Use all your hobbies, which my hobby, of course, was playing chess in my head, but you don't have to play chess in your head. You can play chess with anybody in the world through computer. You can play music, you can sing, you can dance. That's the time to enjoy life. And finally, we are Jewish people. We have great mission. We have great past. Remember, feel it You know, isolation is the best place to feel connection with all the Jews of the world. No disagreements, no debates, everything is not important. What's important is our mutual aim and our solidarity.
You said, by the way, that you played chess in your head during these times. Is it true that you actually beat Garry Kasparov in a chess match was it true?
Of course it is true that I won, and I'm very proud of the game. I sacrificed this night, and it was a great game. But it was not my personal match. It was a simultaneous game, and he was complaining that there were noise and some people were distracting him, and he really made a mistake. And it was a beautiful game, but it was based on the mistake which Gary did. And when he started complaining, I said, Gary, why are you complaining? You didn't have 9 years of training in your head as I had. So how you can compare yourself? So I was laughing. He's a great chess player, and he also became a great dissident. So when I wrote my book, The Case for Democracy, I wrote him inscription. I wrote to dissident Kasparov from chess player Sharansky. So I really like the distribution of roles.
Right. By the way, I know firsthand you're also quite the table tennis player as well.
Who?
You're also quite the ping pong player as well. I know firsthand.
Also. Yulia Edelstein is the champion of the Knesset in ping pong. But also, you know, when he went with the official visit to China, and he was asked whom he wants to meet, he said the world champion of ping pong. And they organized him to play with him, but not like with Kasparov. He had no chance against world champion. So that's why I keep my victory. Just now I received that Gary writes that he liked my messages about isolation, but he wants revenge. I have to be stupid to play with Kasparov again. I have no chance against him. Why should I?
Right. I know he called for a rematch. I'm inviting our viewers to submit questions in the answer chat box. Some of you already have. And one came through that I think is an excellent question that I want to ask you. Natan, you were previously a strong advocate for spreading democracy to autocratic regimes as a cure for many of the world's problems. Have the events of the last decade caused you to modify your views? Have the events during the pandemic, where regimes might be able to grab more power, have they caused you to modify your views?
Well, if my view were, as you say, to impose democracy on authoritarian regimes, then I probably would have to change them. But I never thought that we can impose democracy on anybody, or that we can expand by force democracy anywhere. What I was always telling and writing about it, that in fact, all the people want to live in freedom. And we have to understand that our real allies are not dictators, but the dissidents in those countries. And we have to link our policy or our relations with these countries and with these dictators. And what to do? We must have relations, sometimes very close relations with dictators. But they have to be linked with the question of the fate of the dissidents in those countries. And that's what happened with the Soviet Union, and that's how the Soviet Union was defeated. That's what happened with many other cases. What Arab Spring proved, and I was very happy when it happened. And I have to say, a number of democratic dissidents, my friends from Egypt or from Syria, were predicting that it would happen, definitely from Iran. What was proved that all these dictatorships in the Arab world sooner or later will be hated by their people, exactly as dictatorships in Latin America, on Eastern Europe, or in other places. It doesn't mean that the path to the civil society will be easy. My disagreement with President Bush, who was a big supporter of dissidents, that he thought that the moment we have elections, that's it. It's not true. Free elections and free society, that's the end of the road. Even after French Revolution, there was 50, 60 years still of different dictatorships and bloodshed before there was civil society developed. So it can be a very long way. But if you understand that dictators are sooner or later hated by their own people, and we should not be the allies of these dictators against their own people, then this process can be accelerated.
So you have a long view of achieving democracy, and even though the Arab Spring failed in the short run, you believe that that if we stick with that agenda in the long run, eventually it will develop the necessary social support.
Arab Spring was a very important lesson. I hope to all those who are following the illusion that Mubarak is forever. And remember how many debates I had that our best hope for peace is Mubarak. And definitely the Bashar Assad is reformist, and we can build on this. And whenever you'll say, but wait a minute, they are dictators, their people hate them, it's not our business. It doesn't matter for our struggle for peace. I hope these illusions were lost. I have no doubt if the free world was more consistent in our struggle, supporting dissidents before dictators fall and not after, we could have much more sustained and strong process. No doubt if Iran, which was Iranian people who were the first who were wishing to get rid of their dictatorial regime, if they received support and not cold shoulder from the free world, the results could be different. But in any way, even today, we should remember, of course, the leader of Egypt is an important partner in the struggle against Hezbollah or Hamas. Yes, he is an important partner. But at the same time, he is a dictator who is more and more hated by their people. So we always have to take it into account and not to be in the end with the dictators against their own people.
Do you have any intuitions about how the pandemic might affect the aspiration toward democracy?
Look, people can say that, first of all, the epidemics, I think, strengthen the feeling of solidarity. But I heard already the views. You see, China cope so well with this epidemic because there is discipline. And why there is discipline? Because there is a authoritarian regime. And they said when they give order to people to be at homes, people are afraid not to do it. And when they distribute food in the organized manner, because we are such a centralized country. And that's like the argument how much better dictatorship. Well, I think Israel is proving that you can be democracy, free society, but if you are a responsible free society, if you also understand how to be mobilized against external threats, you can cope with it without giving away your freedom. And the fact that we now have Shabak helping to identify where are ill people, it's good. On the other hand, there is strong warning from the public and establishing of the strong control from the Knesset in order this power of the authorities over the individuals will not cross the line and will stop in the minute this epidemic is finished. So we should not be afraid of the weaknesses of democracy. We should use the advantages of democracy.
Mm-hmm. So, you raised the issue of China, and of course, Israel's a major trading partner of China. Israel's expanding its diplomatic footprint in China. The United States has its own tensions with China, but finds itself dependent on Chinese medical supplies and technology at this period of time, manufacturing capacity at this period of time. How should governments, Israel, the United States, deal with a country like China, which is is not moving along in that direction democratically? How should it view its relationship?
Well, when I'm asked to compare Soviet Union with China, I was mentioned that yes, China is also on one hand ideologically is communist country, on the other hand economically it gave freedom of economical initiative, and that's a huge change. So I do believe that when it comes to the economic, because it is market-oriented country, because there is freedom of economy, we have to use it and we have to cooperate. At the same time, we should not put a blind eye on what's happening with the political prisoners, with the political system, with the persecution of dissidents, with the ethnic cleansing of the whole peoples, of cultures like Tibet culture and some others. I think the fact that already for many years, with the last two presidents, America is having foreign policy free of any linkage to human rights, whether we are speaking about Iran or about China or about any other place. I think it's not good. It's not good for America. It's not good for the world. And I also want to say, with all the economical developments in Israel, yes, Israel has a huge development, which we moved from $50 million to $15 billion, I think, preparation.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important not to be dependent on the countries which are not really free countries, because dictatorships always can have their own agenda. And the fact that suddenly in the moment of the real big national need, you're depending on them, I don't think it's healthy. I don't think that we are depending in any way from the countries which we are even using now, relations with whom we are using now to help us to get necessary equipment, but it's done because it is profitable for them and they have some other interests, and not because we are becoming dependent on them.
Yeah. So Israel is going through its own political crisis now. Perhaps it's on the tail end of that. And some would say, I know Yossi Klein-Halevi has recently argued that it's in a state of a democratic fight for legitimacy, that its very system is at stake here. Perhaps that's too resolved, at least temporarily. What is your feeling on Israel's current political and democratic moment?
Well, no, if you were asking me a week ago, probably I would be much more pessimistic, because really we had this circle of the elections, the year of senseless elections, with a very clear message which electorate was giving, in a way, whether politicians like it or not, electorate was giving a message that we want unity government. And it was long before Corona. There was no other way to continue to rule without going to broad unity government. And then there came Corona, and Corona, it's the message of God to all the mankind. You must have unity government, and definitely to Israel. So that's why as many other citizens of Israel, was trying to appeal to our leaders, to their senses, and to start building unity government. I think Benny Gantz made a very courageous step. It's a risky step, and there are many critics who are saying that he doesn't understand politics. If he doesn't understand politics, thanks God that he doesn't understand politics. He understands the message of God and the need of the people of Israel. We need unity government. Bibi Netanyahu, by the way, also it was not so simple for him after all what his ambitions to build the coalition on the right, to agree to be ready for unity government, where he gives a much bigger part to the partners than their proportion of the government. So both of them are making very serious concessions. It is natural that there is bargaining at this moment about the how many ministers, who has this, who is responsible for this. There are some ideological and many practical bargainings which are natural. I hope very much that before the Pesach we'll have unity government, definitely during the Pesach we'll have unity government, and we'll, well, I would say that in the meantime we are responding from medical point of view, from organizational point of view, we're responding better than most other countries on this challenge. But economically, we cannot have a budget. We can't make any serious decision about moving money because we don't have a government. So we urgently need to have it. I hope we'll have it, and then I'll be much more optimistic. And I hope that my friend Yossi Klein-Halevi also.
So what is your feeling? Do you think Benny Gantz will ever become Prime Minister of Israel?
I'm sure if they'll have unitary government for sure. In a year and a half, Benny Gantz will be Prime Minister of Israel. Even if those who think that Bibi is not going to do it, I think Bibi has no choice. But I think that even without no choice, I don't think that Bibi intends to violate it. He understood the need of it. He proposed, of course, he will make sure that he will get all the positions which he can get after this year and a half, exactly as Benny Gantz now will make sure that it will be in the law and other places that he will be Prime Minister in a year and a half. But I'm sure the moment this government will start, Benny Gantz will be next Prime Minister. Yeah.
So you spent years as chairman of the Jewish Agency, and in that time you were in very extensive contact with diaspora communities. You were at the center, really, of the Israel-diaspora relationship. Where do you think that's going now, and how might the current crisis, medical pandemic, affect the direction of it?
Look, first of all, overall, we are one family. That's very strong feeling. Now, Israel has to be the home for all the Jews, those who live in Israel, or those who don't live in Israel. It belongs to all the Jewish people in the world. And that's belief of all the politicians, those with whom I was cooperating and those with whom I was fighting. And sometimes I was cooperating and fighting at the same time, like with our Prime Minister, and I can say that he had this feeling as strong as all the others that Israel has to be home for all. Having said all this, of course, we had very serious disagreements because, after all, survival strategy of Jewish community in New York, Philadelphia, and surviving strategy of Jewish community in Israel are different. And for Israel defending freedom, it's first of all defending independence of Jewish state in our struggle against all these dictatorships. For, let's say, for American Jews, defending their freedom, it was first of all to guarantee liberal character of their state in order to not undermine them as a community, as a minority, and so on and so on. So I would say that the biggest problems which I saw in the relations was when Israel felt strongly that many American Jews don't understand the challenges of the fight with terror, or, for example, the dangers of Iranian threat and disagreement around the agreement between America and Iran, and it was justified very often. And world Jewry felt very strongly that Israel doesn't understand the importance of liberal Judaism, the importance of for the communities to express their connection to Judaism in different ways, and their criticism of the government of Israel very often was absolutely justified. Between these two criticisms, it was always very important not to lose what unites us, that what unites us is by far bigger than what disconnects us. And then from this point of view, of course, the wars help, or this epidemic help. And I say from my own experience, when I was in the punishing cell, that was the easiest time to feel yourself connected to every Jew in the world. If somebody in punishing cell will say, but still, are you closer to Likud or to Labour? Are you closer to Orthodox Jewry or Reform Jewry? I will not even understand what he's talking about. We are in this big struggle, one family, all together. Who cares what personal? There is KGB and KGB files. They put all these people, all these different organizations on one file, anti-Soviet organizations. So I think at the moment when you're sitting now in your house, it's much easier to feel yourself connected to Benny Gantz and Bibi and Netanyahu simultaneously than when you go out of this isolation and then you have to participate in political debates and then you'll have to fight for your interests. So use this moment of isolation and try to feel connection, how we are small but great people with one mission, with one past and mutual future.
So even while we're having this discussion, there still is a Palestinian-Israeli conflict. There's still an Arab-Israeli conflict. Let's start with the Arab-Israeli conflict. Some would say that there is no Arab-Israeli conflict today in the same way that there once was, that Israel is in a functional peace with many Arab countries, even if it's not in a normalized situation. Saudi Arabia is one such country where Israel has growing ties. Egypt, another, even though there is a formal peace with Egypt. That also, though, that might challenge even the human rights doctrine that you talked about. I mean, if Israel gets closer to the Gulf states that are undemocratic, is it not undermining those values somehow? What is your view about Israel's growing relationship with the Gulf states and how that connects to the support for human rights agenda?
Well, you know, I had conversation with practically every American president, beginning from Reagan, about Saudi Arabia. And I like to challenge them by the fact that Saudi Arabia is a country which denies any human rights. And it's your closest ally. And they always try to explain me that Saudi Arabia and friendship with Saudi Arabia is not about human rights. It's about stability of the Western world because of the oil. And then came 9/11, and you found out that who are the people who made this 9/11? They are all coming from their beginning, ideological beginnings, from Wahhabism, from Saudi Arabian Wahhabism, and from that world with which the America tried to be blind about, not to see what's really happening or believing that it's not connected. So I always believed, and I believe, that even when we must have pragmatic relations, and you know, Churchill and Stalin had very pragmatic cooperation, and Roosevelt, fighting Israel, fighting Hitler. But what was important to remember, that the moment this fight finishes, Soviet Union in one day can turn against you. That's really what happened. So the same here, I would say, now in the Middle East. There are all this denial of Israel because of the rights of Palestinians. It was all pretext. Saudi Arabia and the other countries didn't really care about Palestinians. If they cared about Palestinians, they would make sure that there will be no refugee camps and that Palestinians will not suffer from all these dictatorships and corrupt regimes. But they didn't care about it. But for them, as for every dictator, it was very important to have external enemy. And here is such a great external enemy for Muslim world, Israel fighting the Palestinians. Now, because of practical reason, they found out that with all the importance of having this ideological external enemy, they have now a real physical enemy, not Israel, but that's why they had to change their minds and they start cooperating. And really, you have to say that not on the ground and especially underground, relations are very good, and there is a lot where we can help to one another. But I am saying to our government, as I said to everybody, when you deal with such regimes, remember about what is important for us, for our pragmatic interests. Don't have any illusions. And in any way, supporting of the dissidents should always be the obligation of the free world. The fact that America today is not speaking with Saudi Arabia about the fate of Badawi, and even when Canadian Prime Minister says some word and is boycotted, America is not supporting him in it, I think it's a shame. And well, it's not so easy to convince the leaders of the free world and also our leaders. why it is important to cooperate and at the same time to keep the question of the human rights on the top of agenda. But I believe that that's the way how we can avoid unpleasant surprises in the future.
So there's been some Israeli-Palestinian cooperation on the ground during this pandemic. Well, do you feel that there's any potential opening for a future peace talks? Do you believe that the Trump plan, which has any momentum in the area? What's your perspective on Israeli-Palestinian relations?
Look, I always believed, and I believe now, that the peace process will not be imposed from the top. The peace process will come from the bottom up as a result, and necessary condition, or very important condition for this, is developing of the civil society of Palestinians. And that's why cooperation between peoples is extremely important. And yes, now there is the moment, because of epidemic, it is our mutual interest of Palestinians and Israelis to work very closely on it. And by the way, there exists a cooperation. But at the same time, while it is happening, the fact that it is corrupt dictatorship which is ruling the lives of Palestinians, even when it is in the interest of their own people, they keep on the surface the propaganda that who is behind the coronavirus. Of course, it is Israel and cartoons, and all this propaganda which goes between Palestinian Authority and between Iran and Turkey and some other places, and suddenly Israel is responsible for this. So at the same time, our cooperation with the Palestinian Authority and Palestinian people is deepening on this issue, and it's very good. And I hope that in Gaza we also will have say, or will have an opportunity to help to Gaza, which potentially is in absolute awful station. On the other hand, because the practical interests of their own people is not top priority for the dictators, and top priority for the dictators is to keep their control by mobilizing people to fight against the external enemy, they continue their vicious anti-Semitic propaganda. But I believe that every breach which is appearing, for example, in the economy, there are more and more cooperation and more. If there is one thing very good about plan of Trump, which who knows whether it will be or not, but that he is planning to put a lot of money in independent economy, not through the leaders of Palestinian economy, but through independent Palestinians, and a lot of money for independent education, and a lot of money for rebuilding the refugee camps. These are the things which can really help to the real peace process, because then civil society can emerge. I don't believe that peace process is simply to sign some document that leaders agree about the peace and continue, as it is happening with the Palestinian leaders, to launch all types of awful demagogical attacks on us.
Question from our viewer. There are several actually have asked about the Haredi community in Israel right now, and it's some Haredi leaders not abiding by orders to stay at home and holding services and the rest. What's your view on that? Is that happening? Is that changing?
First of all, we have to understand that it is happening in very small, extreme groups which don't recognize Israel. And it's not ultra-Orthodox world, because 95% of ultra-Orthodox world recognize Israel, accept Israel, and work inside Israel society. On the contrary, two leading ministers who at this moment are playing a very important role is our Minister of the Health Minister, who is the leader of Aguda, and the Minister of Interior, the leader of Shas. So and they are those who are demanding to impose, in fact, curfew on the whole regions of those ultra-Orthodox who refuse to accept to obey the orders. Now, it is extremely dangerous We got to say, if there is now at this moment danger that that curve, which at this moment goes in the right direction, will suddenly bring us to the new crisis, it's exactly what's happening there. Now, this crisis was more or less under control until the Mesibot Purim, until the celebration of Purim. During the Purim, suddenly, we still didn't realize all the dangers, but we started taking the steps. After the Purim, it became clear to the government that they have immediately to close the airports and to impose isolation on big groups of people. So now there is fear that, for example, during Seder Pesach, if again they will start, people start mixing and different families meet, it can go out of the control. And definitely the big threat is that there are some areas in Israel where we don't know what exactly is happening. It's not me, it's Minister Derek who said that maybe in Bnei Brak at this moment there are thousands of ill people and we don't know about it. We have to go and to isolate all these people and to evacuate them urgently. So, why? Because it endangers all the country. So on one hand, it's very minor phenomena in terms of the number of people who disobey. On the other hand, it's very dangerous, and that's why we saw some very unpleasant pictures on our TVs in the last 2 or 3 days when the army is entering synagogues and closing them by force, and when it's arresting people, very religious people, and putting a big fine to them. There is no other way because we have to protect all the citizens of Israel, all our 9 million people, Jews and Arabs and Christians, religious, non-religious, everybody. And that's the responsibility of every citizen sitting in isolation, responsibility of everybody to think about it. Now, our Prime Minister, a few days ago, speaking again to the nation, he said that in Talmud there are words that the one who saves one person saves the whole universe. But it can be opposite. The one because of whom one person becomes ill is responsible for losing of the universe. And it's really very dangerous. We have to act responsibly, and those small groups which disobey, we have to impose the order. And I think in general, Israel society, which learned how to live in the emergency stations, is becoming very good.
Okay. One last question from a viewer. Asked if you've ever considered or would think about being the president of Israel someday. And I can't say I disagree. You'd make a great president of the state of Israel. What are your aspirations?
I never considered, because I left politics many years ago. I realized that politics is not for me. No, I had some aims to integrate this Aliyah. The moment I felt that this aim is reached, I don't enjoy politics. If I compare 9 years in prison, 9 years the government, 9 years in Jewish agency, no doubt that prison and the Jewish agency are much more enjoyable. So it is very important position, President of the United States, President of the State of Israel, but it's a lot of speeches, a lot of receptions, and it's not for me. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I first met you in the late 1980s when I was a student activist, and you haven't changed a bit. You look young, you look you're so energetic, and we're so glad to have your moral voice and intellectual voice of the Jewish people now. We need it more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you. I can tell you that I always felt that I'm younger 9 years, because 9 years in prison are not counted. And also it's very easy to keep your young strength while you're in Israel. So everybody who wants to feel yourself younger, go to prison and then to Israel.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Natan, for being with us. Thank you for our viewers who joined us. If we're going to send you a 2-question survey, please take a second and answer it, because we want to get your thoughts on what other webinars we might consider. And stay tuned for other webinars. We have some great ones planned. So thank you and have a great day, and everybody be healthy and safe.
Thank you.